Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and this time I would like to talk about how perhaps the ultimate Mario is about to be shown off. With the Nintendo Switch 2 on the horizon, many are thinking that we have to see the next 3D Mario really soon because many believe it will be the launch title for this console. Reports are indicating that Switch 2 could be coming out early 2025. Assuming this date holds, then I would agree that 3D Mario probably has to be shown soon. So what I would like to talk more about today is how big of a deal this Mario game may be, and when we might see it under the assumption that it is the launch title. But before going forward, let me ask that if you do enjoy my content, to please subscribe and hit that notification bell. Now, while I will be operating under the assumption that 3D Mario is the launch title for Switch 2, let's first discuss this scenario though, because it's not guaranteed that 3D Mario will be the launch title. Many people have assumed that it will be because it has been rumored. Andy Robinson, the owner of Video Games Chronicle, way back said that he had heard from a few different sources that 3D Mario would be the launch title for Switch 2. However, since this point, there have been changes. We've seen different reports come out and give us different updates. We once thought that Switch 2 would be coming out towards the end of this year, and now it's being reported for early 2025. These things are subject to change, so it's not guaranteed. Some people would argue that Mario Kart makes more sense as a launch title for Switch 2. It's a much bigger seller. Mario Kart Deluxe has sold over 60 million copies on the Nintendo Switch. It is the best-selling game on the console, so Mario Kart has extremely strong selling power. But when it comes to launch titles, it's not just about how much the game will sell eventually. It's about how well it will push the console at first. So part of that is showcasing what the hardware can do so people can understand the strengths of the console and the advantages of having it early on, and then also being simply the kind of game that will encourage people to jump on immediately. And so from these perspectives, 3D Mario makes way more sense than Mario Kart. Let me explain further. So when we take a look at the first year sales on Nintendo Switch, these were the top 3 selling games: Mario Odyssey, Mario Kart Deluxe, Breath of the Wild. In that order. Breath of the Wild came out March 2017 and sold 6.7 million units by the end of 2017, December 31st, March 2017. And then with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, it sold 7.33 million copies between its release time in April and the end of 2017. And then Mario Odyssey, in a far shorter amount of time, releasing in October of that year, and then by the end of the year, sold 9.07 million copies. In other words, in that first year, in a shorter amount of time, Mario Odyssey was a bigger, stronger seller than Mario Kart and Zelda. Now, since both Mario Kart and Zelda have had stronger evergreen sales and have overtaken Mario Odyssey, but in terms of encouraging strong initial sales, Mario Odyssey was a bigger deal. And it was also a tremendous showcase to the console, as most 3D Mario games are. And when you consider the long history of launches for Nintendo, in general they do rely on Mario. The NES, the Super Nintendo, the Game Boy, the N64, the DS, the Wii U, it's pretty common. Sometimes they rely on Zelda, like in the case of the Wii and the Switch with Breath of the Wild. But with the sequel to Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom having just come out last year, and it having taken over half a decade to make, it's unreasonable to think that Nintendo might use Zelda as a launch title to showcase Switch 2, because it's probably, almost certainly, years away. So 3D Mario does make a lot of sense to be the launch title. Now, maybe it doesn't end up being the launch title, and it just comes out in the first year. There are other possibilities, as we've discussed in the past. I think Mario Kart is still an option, I think Metroid is an option, but 3D Mario seems to be the best bet. And so with that in mind, I think they need to show this game off pretty darn soon. Because if the console is actually coming out March of 2025, which also is not guaranteed, but that's what the latest reports are suggesting, and hopefully that holds true considering that it's already been delayed once internally, supposedly, we should see the console this year. Going by the way Nintendo handled the Switch, it came out March 2017. And so they had a big presentation showing everything off in January, but they at least gave us our first initial look with a 3.5-minute trailer in October of 2016. And so some of you might be thinking, okay, so we're just going to get a 3.5-minute trailer this year where they will show off the console during this short trailer, and we'll get just a few little clips of gameplay for a few games during this time, including 3D Mario, which would be the launch title. But I don't think this is the right way to look at it, because they gave us just a few seconds of 3D Mario without us even knowing the actual name of the game before it was even real. Many just thought it was a hypothetical game. That came out towards the end of 2017. It was not the launch title. The launch title was Breath of the Wild, which by that point we already knew a whole bunch about the game. It had this tremendous E3 showcase. There were various trailers already by that point. So when we're talking about the launch title, having just 8 to 10 seconds of footage this year on the launch title, I don't think is going to work. We're going to need to have a significant showcase for at least the launch title this year. And so that ends up being 3D Mario, which most people seem to think is going to be the case, and I would say history supports that theory the most. We are going to have to see a big showcase of this game during this calendar year. Now, some people might be so optimistic that they think we could see it in the next Nintendo Direct this June. But this Nintendo Direct is just about Switch 1, not Switch 2. Nintendo has clarified on this. Now, you could argue that if 3D Mario is a cross-gen title and it's coming out on Switch 1 and Switch 2, then it could be shown off. That's why I think Metroid Prime 4 might be in this Direct, because I think it's coming to both consoles, so showing it off just for Switch 1 here, even though it would be a Switch 2 title as well, would be totally fine. But I don't think 3D Mario is going to be a cross-gen title. Cross-gen titles have become a bit of a popular thing during this era, in large part because of Nintendo's competitors, Sony and Microsoft, but I don't think Nintendo's going to have as many cross-gen titles. When you look at how recently we've learned that about half of the active user base on PlayStation Network is still on PS4, even this many years into the life of the PS5, it goes to show that they haven't had as great of a transition as they would have liked. And I would say part of this is because they've kept the PS4 relevant by having a lot of cross-gen titles. I don't think Nintendo's going to want to do the same thing. They're going to want the Switch 2 to become their primary source of income and business fairly quick. As the Switch continues to trend downwards, they want the transition healthily. So yes, there will be some cross-gen games, there will be some releases on Switch that you will also be able to play on Switch 2 for likely the first or second year of Switch 2 as the Switch 1 wanes. But when it comes to their bigger titles, I really don't think we should be thinking about cross-gen. I mean, even in the case of Sony, Ratchet & Clank, kind of arguably their comp to 3D Mario, was one of the first few exclusives for PlayStation 5. And then when thinking more so about 3D Mario, this game is going to be a significant showcase for the console. That's why I refer to it as the ultimate 3D Mario game. The Switch 2 is going to be dramatically more powerful than the Switch 1. From what we've heard of the shipment leaks, this console from a hardware perspective will be hovering slightly above PS4 power in handheld mode before applying DLSS. And then in docked mode, we'll be hovering around PS4 Pro's Xbox Series S power, also before DLSS. And then when you apply DLSS, we're talking about a pretty nice boost there, which is going to put Switch 2 games in that conversation of Xbox Series S and such. So the console is going to be vastly more powerful, and 3D Mario is likely going to showcase the abilities of this console. And that goes beyond just being extremely pretty. This is going to apply to gameplay as well. I would assume that the worlds are going to be pretty large, and I would also assume that some of the gameplay mechanics are going to be pretty advanced. When taking a look at some of the 3D Mario games that have been used to showcase prior Nintendo consoles, they've done some pretty spectacular things. In the case of Mario 64, well, that was literally this full 3D open sandbox adventure game. Let's remind ourselves that before N64, 3D technology was extremely primitive. Mario 64 pioneered 3D gaming. They showed us how a 3D camera could work. They showed us platforming in a 3D environment. And so that was spectacular, and that was something that was showcased by the N64. Going beyond that though, let's take a look at Mario Sunshine. Mario Sunshine was also a pretty big deal in its own right. With the dramatically increased horsepower, they were able to accomplish some incredible things. The worlds were vast and detailed by comparison to Mario 64, but also some of the mechanics were insane. The water physics in Mario Sunshine still seem impressive by today's standards, I would argue. And now let's consider Mario Galaxy. Mario Galaxy was a pretty game. It was linear, the worlds weren't as vast, but the mechanics we saw were mind-blowing. There were so many puzzles and challenges centered around gravity and orbiting around these spherical objects in space. Those are some special, unique mechanics we had never seen before. And now taking a look at some of the more modern 3D Mario games. In the case of Mario Odyssey, the worlds were pretty vast and detailed, but also performance and resolution were impressive for Switch standards, and just how the game moved and flowed was impressive, especially when you account for the capping mechanics and being able to possess all these different creatures and characters throughout the world seamlessly, and then with all the different gameplay styles that follow depending on these different characters. And then also considering Bowser's Fury was just an expansion to an enhanced 3D world on Switch, but it provided what many seem to think could be a sneak peek into the future of 3D Mario. It incorporated a lot of the linear platforming challenges that we've come to enjoy from a lot of the Mario games like 3D World and Mario Galaxy, but also fitting it within a larger open world space, even bigger than Mario Odyssey. We were provided a mount in Plessy to roam around Lake Lapcat, and the world expanded as we progressed. Something like this could be greatly expanded upon with more density and detail, and even more incredible mechanics implemented in a new 3D Mario game for Switch 2. So then this 3D Mario game is going to be a tremendous showcase for the abilities of the console, and it has a strong chance to be a launch title. So if this is to be the case, and with it almost certainly not being a cross-gen release, it wouldn't be in a June Direct, but I do think it would have to be showcased this year. So I'm thinking that there will be something more substantial for revealing the Switch 2 beyond just a small trailer. I think it'll be a bit more of a presentation, and I think we'll probably see it at some point between the months of August and October. We could just say September, where we typically get some sort of showcase from Nintendo every year, but I think the main point to be made is that it should happen this year, but definitely sometime after June. And revealing it before Tokyo Game Show presents opportunities for third parties to make announcements for Switch 2 during Tokyo Game Show and after, including the Game Awards in December. So maybe in October is too late of a window. August or September is kind of when I'm thinking we will see footage of the next 3D Mario. Now, something to note is that if 3D Mario is not the launch title, maybe we don't see significant footage on it, but I still think we will get a quick glimpse, the same way we got a quick glimpse for Mario Odyssey back in October of 2016. But then that would also mean we would be seeing significant footage for something else that would be the launch title for Switch 2. There's a lot of possibilities, and many of them are quite exciting. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.